1 in 3 is intended for mature audiences. Episodes contain explicit content and may be triggering as they often include violence and other varying forms of abuse such as emotional, psychological, sexual, and physical. In most cases, names have been changed to protect all involved. Please note, statements and opinions of guests do not necessarily reflect those of my own. Hi, warriors. Welcome to 1 in 3. I'm your host, Ingrid. I want to begin today with a quote. Every time I wake up, I pray the nightmare will be over and my son will be in my arms. Just know I tried to forgive you, but that's impossible. Those were the words of Adrianne Oyola spoken at the sentencing hearing of her former boyfriend, Tony Moreno, in May 2017. She was speaking about her 7-month-old son, Aiden Moreno. Now let's go back to the events leading up to that day. It was June 29th, 2015. At just 19 years old, Adrianne stood in front of Judge Barry Pincus in Middletown, Connecticut. Across the courtroom was 21-year-old Tony Moreno. Adrianne was representing herself in a follow-up hearing concerning a temporary restraining order she had filed against Tony nearly 2 weeks earlier. That restraining order, granted on June 17th, was meant to protect both Adrianne and her infant son. In her signed affidavit, Adrianne detailed the troubling path their relationship had taken. Initially, they were happy when they first started dating 2 years earlier. Once she became pregnant, though, something changed. Tony became emotionally and verbally abusive, calling her names like ugly, stupid, dumbass, and bitch. He escalated to pushing and shoving her, and when Adrianne told him to stop hitting her, he chillingly replied, "I could show you hitting." She also described how Tony tried to exert complete control over her and their baby. He wouldn't allow her to take Aiden anywhere without his consent. He told their baby to shut up when he cried and left Aiden alone to cry on a bed and then left the house. Incredibly, Adrianne had just graduated high school the day before filing for that restraining order. But even on that day, Tony continued his manipulative behavior, hiding her graduation dresses and provoking her the next morning. The situation escalated further when Tony refused to let Adrianne take Aiden, and then he left with a baby. At the time she was filing the affidavit, she still had no idea where her son was. Her fear was real. Tony had threatened her life and their sons, often saying he could make them both disappear. He even claimed he could kill her and dissolve her body in chemicals. Just 3 days before the court hearing, Tony had recruited a mutual friend to trick Adrianne into meeting him under the guise his mother was sick and was requesting to see Adrianne and the baby. But when Adrianne showed up, it wasn't about his mom at all. Tony walked right up to her and started making threats. He told her if she didn't make him happy, she'd end up in jail for a year. That's the kind of psychological manipulation and intimidation she was dealing with just days before she had to face him again in court. Once in the courtroom, Adrianne had to recount everything that had led up to that day. Every incident, every threat, every red flag. And there's something really important I want to pause and point out here. Something that stood out to me in the transcripts. When Adrianne was describing the abuse, she said Tony had been mentally abusive. She specifically said he wasn't physically abusive. But the judge pushed back on that. He reminded her and everyone in that courtroom that shoving and pushing are physical abuse. And I want to highlight, because I know some of you listening may have had the same thoughts at some point. If there are no bruises, if it wasn't a slap or a punch, then maybe it doesn't count as physical abuse. But that's simply not true. Abuse can look like a shove. It can look like physical intimidation without even laying a finger on the victim. It can be subtle, but it's still dangerous. It's still physical, and it's still abuse. Okay, back to the courtroom. After Adrianne gave her testimony, the judge turned to Tony to hear his side of the story. And no surprise here, Tony's version looks very different. He painted Adrianne as overly emotional, even unstable. According to him, everything he did was just a reaction to her outbursts. He minimized his behavior, twisted the narrative, and tried to shift the blame back onto her. Something we see too often in abusive dynamics. It's a classic tactic. Make the victim look irrational so the abuser can look like the reasonable one. But when you step back and look at the full picture, the manipulation, the threats, the control, it becomes clear who was in survival mode and who was trying to maintain power. After hearing both sides, the judge shifted focus. He wanted to know more about their current living situations. Adrianne explained that after the temporary restraining order was granted, she and Aiden had moved in with her 2 sisters, her brother-in-law, and her nephew, a full house with plenty of support. Meanwhile, Tony was still living with his mother. And here's where things take a frustrating turn. Judge Pincus, after hearing that Adrianne was surrounded by adults, decided Tony didn't pose a physical threat. His reasoning? That with that many people around, surely Adrianne and Aiden would be safe. But here's the problem with that logic. Abuse doesn't disappear just because there are more people in the room. Control, manipulation, and intimidation, they don't need privacy to thrive. And predators don't always act when people are watching. This moment highlights a gap we see all too often, a misunderstanding of how abuse works, especially emotional and psychological abuse. Safety isn't guaranteed by numbers. It's guaranteed by taking threats seriously. I'm going to share a few excerpts from the judge's statements, and it's important to recognize that the way he says these things, he's putting the blame equally on the 2 parents. Quote, "I think the 2 of you don't have a good relationship. You know, there's chaos in your relationship. I'm not satisfied that you're in imminent harm, that he's going to come over and cause you physical harm or physical violence. I don't know whether the 2 of you are mature enough at this present time to have an adult relationship. You know, the behavior that both of you talked to me about is behavior that, teenagers, you're 21, but you're not giving me grown-up behavior. So in any event, the restraining order. I'm not going to grant the restraining order. But in any event, the 2 of you need to figure this out for the sake of your child. You're parents now. You need to grow up and deal with each other as adults. And you're not doing that right now. You're dealing with each other like your children. I'm sorry to say that, but you are. So I wish you well. Good luck." Adrianne took the judge's recommendation and went down to file for custody. Although she requested full custody, Tony was granted shared time. On July 5th, 2015, Tony Moreno, during his custody time, took Aaden Moreno to the Arrigoni Bridge. Around 11:15 to 11:30 p.m., Tony texted Adrianne, "Tony, enjoy your new life without us. Adrianne, you can't just decide to not bring him back, Tony. Seriously, don't play around like that. Please don't try and take him from me. Tony, you tried to take him away from me. You failed. I didn't. Enjoy your new life without us. Adrianne, where are you? Where is Aiden? Tony, he's dead. And soon I will be too. Adrianne, you're playing right now. Please tell me you're kidding. Please don't hurt Aiden. Please." Tony called his mother and requested she come to the bridge to retrieve Aiden's stroller and his phone containing pictures. As his mother arrived with police, Tony jumped from the bridge, plummeting 90 feet into the Connecticut River. He was rescued and survived. Aiden's body was recovered 3 days later. Tony was found guilty of murder and risk of injury to a child in February 2017. A few months later, in May, he was sentenced to 70 years in prison without eligibility for parole. It was a small measure of justice in the wake of an unimaginable tragedy. Before I close, I want to share one more important update. Just this past April, a judge rejected the state's request to dismiss a case that Adrianne has filed against DCF, or the Department of Children and Families. In her case, Adrianne argues that DCF failed her and her son in several critical ways. For one, no DCF representative showed up to the restraining order hearing. Their presence and their expertise could have helped the judge better understand the seriousness of the situation and the real threat Tony posed. And after the restraining order was lifted, DCF didn't conduct any follow-up safety assessments. No checks, no intervention, nothing. Adrianne's case is about accountability. It's about making sure that no parent is left to fight for protection alone without the full weight of the system behind them. Thank you for listening. Sources for today's episode can be found in the show notes. I'm going to take next week off to enjoy the first week of summer vacation with my family. And since we're heading into the holiday season, I'll be repurposing a previous episode on holiday preparedness for next week. Otherwise, I'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode for you. Until then, stay strong. And wherever you are in your journey, always remember you are not alone. Find more information, register as a guest, or leave a review by going to the website 1in3podcast.com. That's the number 1, IN, the number 3, podcast.com. Follow 1in3 on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1in3podcast. To help me out, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. 1in3 is a .5 Pinoy production. Music written and performed by Tim Crow.